Testing, 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 testing. Sound. Testing the sound. Testing the sound. Testing sound. Testing.
Oh, we're already live?
Yeah. No sound yet. What am I missing here? Oops. Oh. That wasn't. Oh. Microphone on. Testing the sound. Seems better. Sound, sound, sound.
I hope this goes into the recording automatically.
It does.
Sweet.
Sound. I call it blue, blue.
I hope this goes into the recording automatically. It does.
Okay. I call it.
So you want to mute that part of the screen there?
Yeah. So sound's working. Now we turn the sound off. God damn it.
So you want to mute that? Sweet if it went on infinity loop.
When I do it on my own, it does the infinity loop, and I have to like make sure it's not going crazy. Okay, so like we're good. Just gonna double check one more time. Okay, so like we're good. Yep. Cool. We are rolling.
Boom. That way you can turn on your system sound. Or does it not matter?
Doesn't matter. Whatever's fine.
But this way we're making sure that all the speakers, etc., headphones, etc., work. So, all right, where's the one we need to be looking at here? This one?
That's the one.
Okay, cool.
Let's reload it. Maybe some people entered.
Enter. Dun 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 dun.
Oh, stupid.
Yeah.
We're watching ourselves on the slight delay that you guys see, and I'm making fun of myself.
All right. Ready to go?
Good to go. We got a bunch of questions preloaded, and I have a couple announcements.
Why don't you hit us with the realness, Dr. Hoffman?
All right. First off, Nick wanted us to let you guys know that the Cookbook 2, I believe, is on sale tonight for RP Plus members, and then I think tomorrow for RP clients. Did I say that right?
Yep.
So Cookbook 2 now available if you like to get your groove on with cooking. I'm terrible. I should actually read both of those books.
You should learn how to read too.
Yeah. I'm terrible. Announcement number 2. For those of you who like to tune into Nick Shaw's weekly webinar, he will be moving on Thursday, and I'm going to take over at the normal time. So you can just log in at the normal time for Nick's, and I will be me instead. So if you're disappointed, I'm sorry ahead of time.
What does Nick even talk about on this weekly webinar? He doesn't know anything.
Yeah. I think he looks at the web, like the forum questions, and he's like, Mike and James.
Mike and James will talk about that, and yeah, we're done. 30-second webinar. All right.
That was it for me.
Well, all right. Let's get into the questions. James, do you want to hit up some of these questions? Do you want me to read off some of these questions from people who couldn't make the seminar?
Yeah. Let's do those first. So
Okay.
these are forum questions / people messaging us directly.
Cool. Steve Blair says, a couple of deload questions. Well, Steve, you only get one question, so we're going to just not answer half of them. Just kidding. All right. First question: are the volume intensity recommendations from
Science and Practice of Strength Training?
Maybe Scientific Principles of Strength Training? I think that's our book.
Oh, okay.
Based on the first or last week of the mesocycle. The book says 50% volume of overload day, but if I'm adding sets per week, the volume difference could be quite large depending on which week I base the calculations on. So I think the best answer is mesocycle average.
Mm-hmm.
So 50% of your mesocycle average.
Yeah, if you use week
Your
1,
MAV.
then you're going to be really lowballing it. And if you use week 3, you might actually be undercutting what you need a little bit. So like average or week 2 is probably a good.
Yep. And then for strength mesocycles, the intensity recommendations of 70% in intensity and 50% or 70% volume and 50% intensity seem incredibly low. 50% is normally my first warm-up set. Feels weird to just walk in the gym, slap a couple plates on the bar, do a couple of sets, then move on to the next exercise. Am I doing things right? You're doing things exactly right.
Yeah, it's supposed to feel like really light. It's supposed to feel like a warm-up.
Imagine if deload felt really hard. How would you be dropping it?
And the thing is, the volume is fairly obvious. We know that volume is probably most related to fatigue, the total amount of work you've done. But the thing is with the strength phase is it does so much more trauma to the actual tissues. That's why we really need to make sure we back off on those deloads. Otherwise, you will not heal, right? When you're doing those basic strength or maximal strength phases, you are blowing apart muscles, tendons, joints, ligaments, all that stuff. So it's worth it, even though it might feel like you're totally wussing out and not doing much.
Yeah, 100%. George Madignan asks, I had a question in regards to starting strength training for my boys. They are 12 and 13. They currently do jujitsu, waste of time, stupid sport, but wanted to add strength. What, if any, suggestions you guys might have?
Oh boy! We usually tackle this question in one shape or form. It seems like once per week, and we usually kind of come around to the same general answer. You want to start it, or
sure? The number one thing you want when you're starting people in weight training, especially at a young age, is to make sure that their technique on the fundamental movements, squats, bench presses, push-ups, overhead presses, pull-ups, rows, deadlifts, is as perfect as possible with minimum amounts of resistance. So that means you're going to be doing lots of sets of 5 to sets of 10 with weights that they're probably 6 repetitions or more away from failure every set. And just on the compound movements, maybe 2 or 3 times a week. Get them a little bit sore, let them heal, hit them again. Keep volumes relatively the same. Start them off with 1 set of everything, maybe work up to 3 sets of everything, a couple times a week, maybe 12 to 15 total sets per workout, each workout 2 to 3 times a week. Some pushing, some pulling, some leg stuff. Emphasize technique. One thing you can do is if they don't do good technique on a rep, don't count the rep. So they'll do a squat halfway down, 5, again, 5, 5. They'll look at you and go, you want to squat all the way down? You know how to do it. So focus on teaching good technique. And once they've learned the good technique over a couple of practice sessions, let them do 5 to 10 rep sets for months, like 6 away from failure. Yeah. Not even close. And you would think, man, that's not very hard. They're 12 and 13.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be
hard.
They're
going to grow like weeds. And you can start putting weight on the bar just to keep them 6 reps away from failure, not turn it into 20 reps away from failure once they master the weight. So you're going to load more weight on for them. Eventually, when they're 16, 17, they can start doing formal hypertrophy phases, strength phases, and peaking phases. But for several years, really submaximal compound movement training, just a couple times a week. It'll keep them safe from getting too beat up with their jiu-jitsu. It'll put on a ton of muscle and develop a ton of strength.
Yeah. So totally agree with Mike on all those points. If you wanted to get a little bit fancy, and this is only after you have exhausted your resources with technique and getting a good balance of like push-pulling movements, kind of feeling out what they're capable of doing. One kind of top layer thing you can do if you have somebody who's maybe a little beyond their peers is a little bit of a periodization scheme in there, in that when they're not actively competing, when they don't have any major competitions, stick to the higher rep ranges, like the 10s, stuff like that. And then as they move into their competitive season or when they have more matches coming up, you can move them into like the 5 range, just a little bit of periodization there, nothing too fancy. Still operating in the same general range, but you can kind of wax and wane the volume a teeny bit for them, but nothing crazy.
Yeah, really good stuff. Next question, Evgeny Rushai asks.
Nice. I wouldn't even know where to start on that one.
Yeah, I sure hope he's Eastern European because that's how I said it.
I think he had I think this one has like a bazillion questions on
That's
this
awesome.
one.
All right. Question number 1. I'm interested in your opinion on the topic of super high protein feeding and its practical implications. In the last couple of years, Jose Antonio et al. Had done some interesting studies on the topic. From what I understand, it was once again proven healthy people can consume very high protein amounts without any side effects. Yes, that is true. You can consume basically how much protein can you eat if you have normal healthy kidneys? Well, minimum fats for health, minimum carbs for operating your brain, getting enough fiber, getting enough micronutrients from the fruits and veggies, and then you can literally have the rest of your diet in protein. You'll be just fine. So that's that. And then, however, is there practical implications? Will this research have any impact on the upcoming RP diet book? No. We've already covered high protein diets in our diet and health book.
Yeah. The practical implication here, though, is that calories are still king, right? There's no way around that. And so the problem that you run into is if you are doing what Mike said, where you're minimizing carbs and fats and maxing out your protein, you still have to hit some level of calorie balance. So you have an unfavorable shift in the 3 macronutrients where you're prioritizing protein, and it's probably not doing anything extra for you after a certain point, which is usually right around a gram per pound of body weight or so. And then you're just missing out on all the benefits of carbs and even fats to some degree. So it's kind of there is a practical problem there where you might actually be doing yourself a pretty big disservice.
Yeah. Now, funny enough, here's what he says next. I recently started using such an approach when I go on vacations. Last time I went on a 2-week vacation after finishing a 10-week-long cut, which resulted in a weight loss of 6 kilograms.
Oh, nice.
We had an all-inclusive restaurant, my man, and ate 3 times a day. My plate was 1/3 to 1/3. I think that was 1/2 to 1/3. As lean protein as I can find. The rest was mostly non-starchy vegetables and some fruit here and there. Considering I did my active rest phase during this vacation and mostly did walking 2 to 4 times a day, 45 minutes at a time with a fairly lowish amount of carbohydrates didn't hurt me. Before my vacation, my weight was 88.7 kilograms. After the vacation, I resumed dieting, and after the first few days, it was 89.1. After a week, it was back to 88.8. So basically, I gained dick, which was a butt hurt for my relatives who ate everything in sight and gained a few kilos. Can this effect be attributed to the amount of protein and its high thermic effect? No. Here's the thing about thermic effect of protein people are often in the dark on. If you test the amount of energy derived from protein in a bomb calorimeter, it's got something like 6 and sometimes 7 calories per gram. But it's never labeled as 6 or 7, it's labeled as 4. It's labeled as 4 after the thermic effect has already been taken out. There is no added thermic effect of protein past 4 calories per gram. That's all you get out of it, 4 calories. It's not like it's any less than that with the thermic effect integrated. That being said, it's not the thermic effect of protein that kept you from gaining a bunch of weight. It's the fact that if you have a high protein diet, it squashes your hunger like crazy. Mm-hmm. Basically, what you just told us is you ate mostly lean proteins and veggies. You were on a diet during your vacation.
And you kept physical activity pretty minimal, so you probably hit a really happy spot where you're eating a lot of protein, but you weren't doing a ton of physical activity. And actually, I like your setup. You did a hard cut for 10 weeks, and then you pieced out for 2 weeks.
Yeah. And, if you're okay with not eating a shitload of dessert and other delicious foods on vacation, I'm not. I personally go on vacation. I train like an animal. and eat everything I can.
Yeah.
But if you're cool with this kind of vacation, it's actually, sorry, James, it's actually kind of relaxing and stuff for you. That's totally cool. No magic protein, no thermic effect stuff. Just it squashes your appetite pretty well. It fills you up a lot, so you're not tempted to eat everything else under the sun. And lean protein just doesn't have that many calories. There's only so much lean protein you can eat. So
Yeah, there's only so much chicken you can eat.
Yeah, for sure. Related to the previous question, as I said, I did 10 weeks diet, then a diet break, and now I'm resuming cutting. My initial plan was 3 mesos, 5 weeks long each, 15 weeks total cut, then mini mass with super crazy high volumes, then maintenance, then mini cut 5 weeks, and then 15 weeks of massing. Sounds a good plan. Considering that I did active rest phase after the first 10 weeks, I could potentially extend the cut another 10 weeks.
Yeah, so keep in mind, the active rest really probably is not enough to potentiate another series of cutting for an additional 10 weeks, if I'm reading that correctly. I'd be careful about that. So I would say, I mean, for men, like guys can get away with doing the 4 weeks of kind of maintenance dieting and kind of recharge. I still would recommend upwards of 2, maybe even 3. You know, I think males can kind of get away with 1 more often than not, but 2 weeks of active rest, and you didn't even indulge on your active rest really. So I would say no.
However, I considered considering I planned my mini mass after the cut, I kind of run into the situation of doing hypertrophy type training for 25 weeks straight, which is more than 6 months, and from this perspective, potentially an overkill. Suggestions: take a maintenance phase somewhere in there.
Yeah, just pepper in some strength phases. There's no need to do that long, consistent hypertrophy work. I mean, every 3 mesos or so, pepper in a strength phase, boom.
Yeah. Number 3, once again related. Let's say I cut for whatever length of time, then mini mass, then maintenance. And then comes the aggressive mini cut. I asked this question before, and Dr. James answered it like a boss. However, I'm still unsure of how to couple diet, training, and volume periodizations. Here is what I mean. The plan is to cut closer to that maximally allowed, and in the last week, slightly above that 1% of body weight loss per week. If I would start massing right after that, maintenance, I do mostly 6 to 8 reps for the first meso, then 8 to 10. Holy fuck.
Got lost in a sea of numbers there. So the first problem we're seeing is too many consistent mesocycles of hypertrophy training, which I think we would want to.
Yeah.
If that's meant to be all mass phase.
On the other hand, from what I understand, after a mini mass plus maintenance phase, even going into a short but aggressive mini cut will not result in much or any muscle loss, even with a deficit close to 1% and volumes that are not very high. True, that is true. You don't have to smash your volumes super high in a cut. Just have to be high enough to prevent muscle loss. Or I can flip the metabolite phase, do it first, but with the lower volumes. And to be completely honest, I have to write all this out and look at it for a while. I don't want to give you bad advice just by eyeballing shit.
You know, we can give it just a more general advice where usually when you're sequencing up these phases, it's probably a pretty good idea. If your goal is just to look good naked, but you indicated in the previous question, you know, kind of a first good place to start is usually your heavy-ish phase. Now, obviously, you're not going to go heavy like 5s and 3s for your mass phase or your cut phase, but, you know, you're like on the heavier side, like 6 to 8, maybe 6 to 10. Your next one, you move into more traditional hypertrophy stuff, kind of like that 8 to 12, maybe upwards of 15. And then the last one, if you want to pepper in a metabolite phase, it's probably a pretty good idea. And that would be a really easy sequence to follow. And there's still plenty of wiggle room even within that. I think you might be just trying to stretch some of those phases out too long, which is making it overly complicated. Just stick to like 3 in a row, pop in a maintenance phase. When you do the maintenance diet, make it a strength phase. And I think that would really make a lot of these problems a lot easier for you.
Yeah, Evgeny, unfortunately, to be completely honest, I can't answer your question. It is a question that the kind of question that would require a coach to sit down and write you a plan. It's some very fine tuning of integrated periodization. I'd basically have to draw out kind of a chart and align your training to make sure I'm not getting anything wrong, to your diet to make sure I'm not getting anything wrong. If it was like one, say, phase or 2 phases, but there's like 4 or 5 phases in there, and there's phases before and after that you're concerned with, that requires a level of thought that is inappropriate for public forum.
Yeah.
Number 4, 4 to 5 months ago, I injured my left calf. The months before the injury, I did a shitload of volume for my calves while standing and seated. I did something like 30 sets a week, which I now understand was idiotic. Huh. At some point, I started getting benign fasciculations in my calf. I've been there, not for calves, but for other muscles, and backed off. However, it was too late one day running. After a bus, I had a severe cramp in my left calf, which took 1 month. No calf work to heal to the point where I don't feel it at rest.
You running? We say he was running for the bus.
Yeah. By the way, the calves hypertrophy guide. By the way, the calves hypertrophy guide was the only one I didn't take the time to read, and that would most likely have saved me. So fuck me. Now I'm in a situation that I can't do standing calf. Gastroc is hurt. Work with deficit even with my own body weight. After up 5 to 6, I start feeling discomfort in the injured area. However, I can do flat, no deficit, BFR, body weight standing calf raises, sets of 25 to 30, a lot of sets. Also, I can do weighted seated calf raises. Soleus is fine. Your soleus doesn't grow much anyway, and it makes your calves look ugly because it's the bottom of your calf. I wouldn't really train that much, just as an aside. With a deficit and feel no pain, what would be the best recovery modality for my calves? Should I stop all gastroc work and focus on soleus work for the upcoming 3 or 4 months and then carefully bring in gastroc work? Yes. Or should I do BFR? No, you should just rest your calves for a while and then do BFR later.
Your calves aren't going to shrink anytime soon. The thing, because you're weight bearing all the time, you're very, very low risk of significant atrophy.
Yeah, and it all comes back really fast because you already have all the myonuclei. And then maybe progress to flat gastroc work for sets of 20, max 15 to 20, and then 10 to 15. Yeah, totally. Assuming it will heal. If you develop benign all of the muscles that I've ever developed benign fasciculations, half by overtraining, half of them have healed completely, half of them have never healed. My pecs have never healed, my triceps have never healed. My quads have. I had benign fasciculations in my quads for too much volume, but it's really bad news. I can't put it to you any other way than that. It might never heal. It might just continue to repull all the time, so be open to that idea. Anyways, I'm very open to suggestions. P.S. I'm currently cutting. However, I have no problem with losing some gastric mass if total rest is required to fully heal it. Yeah, I would say back away for 1 or 2 months. And then introduce BFR and I would say move intentionally slowly when you're doing that stuff. I wouldn't say push a ton of weight and go crazy. BFR and the risk of peripheral vein thrombosis. From what I understand, unless one is coagulation is fucked in some other way or another, vein inflammation thrombosis is not an issue with BFR. That's what I have been led to believe as well.
Same. No major cardiovascular considerations for BFR.
Small question regarding maintenance phase and leg training. So let's say that our minimum maintenance volume for quads is 8 sets and hams is 6 sets. Let's say one has 2 leg days in a week, of which one is quad dominant and the other is hamstring dominant. So it says doing justice to both of them would be very hard, not when it's maintenance. You can actually do justice to both of them.
Yeah.
On maintenance. So when I have my quad day, I do maintenance volume for quads, e.g. 8 sets of squats. Okay. And for hamstrings, I do something like 4 to 5 sets of light deadlifts. And the next leg workout, I do 2 leg days in a week. You're already doubling your maintenance volume. Maintenance volumes per week, not per workout. So when you say you do 8 sets of squats in your first workout, you've already reached your maintenance volume.
Yeah, that's
you got to rethink that.
Yeah,
you got to have
maintenance volume is way lower than you might be considering. Maintenance volume is tiny. You might be confusing minimum effective, but then again,
no, that's maintenance volume. It's per week, not per workout. Because remember, per workout, anytime you get per workout input, unless it's very advanced, esoteric, like minimum effective per workout dosing kind of thing, like some stimulus threshold, per workout advice is really stupid because if someone says, oh yeah, per workout, you should do this many sets, they're like, okay, I'll just do a workout every day then.
Yeah.
That's 50 fucking sets a week. That's complete insanity.
What if
per week,
a
per
bad day
unit
or
time.
A good day?
Right. Doesn't make any sense. Per week. Thank you for all the questions, by the way, Evgeny. All right. Shimmy Hacker asks, how can one integrate high-intensity cardiovascular training, interval training, sprints, fighting sports into their hypertrophy training block and experienced the most minimal trade-offs, leg-intensive cardio work on non-leg training days, high-intensity cardio on one's day off from weight training? What is the best strategy? James.
So there's a couple things you can consider. The first thing that I like to start getting people to think about, unless you're doing a sport that requires you to ambulate while running, like rugby or something, start considering low-impact modalities first off, if you're really trying to maintain as much muscularity as possible. So lay off the running, lay off the sprinting, get on a bike, push a sled. You can even use like a rower or an elliptical or something like that. I mean, doing HIIT on the elliptical is kind of lame, but it works and it's fine, and it will really, really have a less negative impact on your total MRV. So doing things you can do concentric only, like my personal favorite choices are the bike and the assault bike, because you can get your arms in there too, and you can really burn a crap load of calories. Now, it kind of depends on what you're doing this for. So one of the examples that you listed was fight sports. So ideally, you can actually get a lot of your cardio from doing your fight sport practice, and that will actually be used in lieu of doing structured cardio like HIIT training on a bike or a treadmill. So that's usually what I would favor. Now, if you're doing kind of we always want to think of a phasic training model. So it's, I can give you kind of like a short, here's a one-time kind of answer, but really we want to think of it in the long term. So what you might be thinking of is when you're doing your hypertrophy phase, it might be good to start incorporating some HIIT style training on something like a bike, which has actually been shown to be a better choice than running for maintaining muscle mass and strength. So it's the least negative of the two. And I would generally kind of intersperse them away from leg training as much as you can, just to minimize the interference effects. So there is something to be said about training them on the same day in terms of fatigue management and actually getting more adequate leg recovery. However, generally, if you're doing overload cardio, for the sake of doing overload cardio, you would like to split those up as much as you can. So as long as you have like a dedicated day in between those leg sessions, I think you're good. So if you did legs one day, upper the next day, and then you did a session of cardio in the evening, that's totally fine. And then as you transition throughout the your different phases, as you move into strength or something else, you might actually switch to your actual sport activity, which you listed fight sports, combat sports, and use more live drilling, sparring type activities to get the cardio from that and actually remove structured cardio entirely. So we don't want to think about it as terms of like, this is how you do this. We kind of think of it in terms of emphasis, de-emphasis, and training across phases. Mike, do you want to add to that?
That's pretty good. Next question. Do you see reason in doing sets of 6 during a hypertrophy phase? Yeah, if you're really fast twitch, if you have some muscles that are really fast twitch, sets of 6 might be cool. Some people's hamstrings are up to the challenge, glutes. Some people have really fast twitch pecs or front delts, and they benefit from sets of 6. Other times, it's usually just the forces are so high that it's not really worth the injury risk and the extra fatigue, because you can get a lot of volume out of it. And you don't get a ton of hypertrophy unless it's really fast twitch musculature. I think sets of 8 are about as low as most people should go. If you're a power lifter, sets of 6 are fine for hypertrophy. If you're looking to do physique, I would say sets of 6 should be sparsely put in there. When you mentioned that it's coming from a viewpoint of maximizing one's physique while still having aspirations of being strong, well, yeah, then you can do 5s and 4s too every now and again. 6s are definitely a good thing to do. But remember that, most of the physique athletes you aspire to look like don't care about strength. Jared Feather sure as hell doesn't.
Yeah,
you mention him.
And the thing is, like, again, don't try and split the difference just because you want to be both, right? So have dedicated phases where you work on building muscle mass. Have dedicated phases where you work on strength. Don't try and do them both at the same time.
Yeah. Is it possible to mitigate the bloat and stuffed feeling one receives from a hypercaloric diet through added cardio? Yes. Does adding cardio to one's mass gain phase to make one feel less full and heavy negate the effects of being hypercaloric in the first place? If you do too much cardio, yes, but you can out-eat that. The problem is you can't out-eat AMP kinase activity in your legs or whatever you're using for cardio. So the cardio that you do on a mass phase can be extant, it can exist, but it should be minimal. I would say if you're doing any more than about 300 calories of added cardio per day on a mass phase, any more than that is probably nuts, unless you're enormous. I don't do any more than 200 usually on my mass phases. It keeps me a little bit leaner. It lets me eat a bit more food. It keeps the bloat down a little bit. Anything more than that, I would say, would start to interfere locally with leg development too much.
And the other thing too, and this is something that maybe is nitpicky, but it's worth differentiating, like doing structured overload cardio and doing like neat kind of stuff, right? Mm-hmm. So like, Mike doesn't go in to the gym with a heart rate monitor on and fucking blast out cardio like his life depended on it, right? It's more of like a slightly upscale version of NEAT, right? He's just maintaining some energy expenditure. So for mass, like doing overload cardio is virtually out of the question unless you are like a field sport athlete and you have to get it in at some point. But for physique training, I don't really see too much benefit there.
Concerning in-season weight training, in-season for what? Sport in general. Would it be best to train in a lower rep range just to maintain one's gains but still work in the 70 to 80% rep range? Or would it be better to stay within a hypertrophy range? Okay.
So I think
so as to keep the loads lower and maintain a high technical efficiency in the lifts. I don't understand. So first of all, let's refute some myths here. Your technical efficiency should not change based on the load.
So, one of the things that we'll see is as the load goes up, the propensity for technical breakdown can occur, right? So as it gets more challenging, we can see people start to break down, but
you can do that with higher reps taken close to failure.
Yeah, that's true.
So basically, if you stay the same range away from failure, a couple reps shy, you should get the same amount of technical breakdown with every single kind of load. If your athletes are experiencing technical breakdown from the heavy weights they should be doing in season to keep the volumes low and the muscle on and the force is high, then they need better coaching, plain and simple.
So I just want to squash this one. You almost never, with very minimal exceptions, do hypertrophy style training or even kind of general strength style training in season, because the MRV for things, now you said sports, so we're just going to go on a limb and assume kind of traditional strength power sport here. The MRV for power and speed development is drastically lower than anything else. They're very, very sensitive to fatigue. So there's no way in hell you can do hypertrophy training, even general like 4 to 8 strength training. We're talking about basically maximal strength, power, and speed activities only. And if you're doing more than 3 to 4 reps, you're probably doing your athletes a big disservice.
Do you see reason in increasing calories week to week during a mass meso to accommodate increases in volume? I've been getting this question a lot. Yeah, as you increase volume, you generally increase calories. The thing is that so on a cutting phase, you wouldn't do this because it just helps you generate a bigger deficit, and that helps you lose weight. So forget that. But you set in a massing phase, which is a good start. The thing is about the massing phase is just as you do more volume, your metabolism ramps up and you weigh more. Those two things by themselves also contribute, and your NEAT usually goes up as you eat a lot more food. So all of a sudden, you think you're adjusting calories just for the extra volume in the weight room, but you have at least 3 or 4 other variables which also expend more calories. The increase in volume is a theoretical contributor to the calorie increase you have to do week to week, but here's how it works. Your body weight's on track, you're doing great. If your body weight starts to not hit your goals for gaining the pound or half pound a week that you want to gain, up the calories. Can you anticipatorily up the calories based on volume? Sure, but you better integrate NEAT into that. You better integrate metabolism rise, and you better integrate the fact that you're going to be heavier and thus you're more metabolism to run. So all of those factors do contribute in general of week to week calorie increases anyway in a mass gain, of which volume contributions are just one part.
Yeah, and I think the take-home message is the process is still the same. Monitor your body weight, add calories as needed. So,
which is why James and I aren't super big. We've been asked this question before of like, well, see, the volume goes up. Shouldn't you increase your calories? Yes, but 3 or 4 different other things change as well. So you should be increasing your calories anyway. And volume is just a contributor to that. And then you fundamentally say, well, how much do those 3 or 4 things weigh into the total equation? Well, your body weight will tell you that. And if your body weight's going up, great. If it's not, you got a problem, no matter what kind of calculations you made.
Absolutely. You know? Did we tear through all those pre questions?
Yep.
Hot damn.
Yep.
Well, let's go to the live questions.
All right, live.
Felipe Machado, always a regular. Hey guys, I had a deloading week program on the 5th week of my meso, but I just realized that I'm going to be on holidays on the 6th one. Is there an optimum way to get around it? I thought about just holding the overreaching week in the 5th one, then deload. Do you think this would disturb my progress? I'm in the 4th week of the first strength meso, have 2 more ahead. So I think you can go about it 2 different ways. I think you can, if you can tolerate it and you're not feeling like you're going to be totally broken down, you can stretch out another week of training, but just maybe don't progress quite as aggressively as you typically would in terms of volume and intensity.
Go up in intensity, but not in volume is a good one.
Yeah, don't go up crazy, take big jumps. And sometimes people will, like in a strength phase, they might make like a 10% jump week to week, especially in that first week. Just tone it back.
Make smaller jumps. Start right now with smaller jumps.
Exactly. And that's totally fine. The other thing is just to take overreach like you've never overreached before, and then just take 2 weeks of deload. It's not the end of the world, and just enjoy your holiday.
Yeah, either one of those probably works pretty well. Michael Bamonde asks, for a variety of injury-related reasons, and mostly my failure to accept myself as a real man, I've been unable to train my lower body seriously. I'm just kidding. I made that last part up. You can't train lower body. Come on. I have been unable to train my lower body seriously or consistently for over a year.
Ouch.
That sucks. I've been there. However, I've been able to train my upper body pretty much normally, and now I'm healthy and medically cleared to train my lower body again. I have some fat to lose and was planning on using 5-day full body male physique template, shady authors. But I'm curious as to whether you have any recommendations for individuals who are completely detrained in one area, but not in others. I know cutting while injured is a bad idea, but what about after you've healed and are now disproportionately weak in a previously injured area? Additionally, should upper and lower body lifts be programmed differently in this case? Oh boy, yes, 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 and yes. First of all, I would like to advise you to not cut for at least 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
Do low volume strength work with easing into the weights for your, well, actually, so you just came, you're just the first time medically cleared. It's not clear. I guess that means rehab is over as well.
I think he means he's post rehab,
ready to train.
Ready to train.
Start doing just a couple of sets per week of 10 to 15 reps light. Mostly you can do squats and stuff like that, but I would say even just start with leg extensions, leg presses.
Yeah.
Work it in slow.
And if that's overwhelming, like it doesn't sound hard like when we're talking about it, but if you find like just getting up to 10 reps and you are wiped out, you might even have to start lower and really just building some basic work capacity, doing some like sets of 5 to 8.
But not with heavy weights.
Not with
sets
heavy weights.
Of 5 with light weight.
Correct.
Because remember, right now you're going to grow from everything. So you don't have to push it. You save the pushing for later. After you're done, let's say doing sets of 5s to 8, get your work capacity back, then you start doing more and more sets with deload, of course, of 10 to 15 reps. When you're really good with those and they're making you normal sore instead of crazy sore or just normal sore at high volumes, start to add weight to those sets of 10 to 15 reps to get back to your normal 10 to 15 rep weights. That's going to take you probably 4 to 6 months. Halfway through that process, you can probably start cutting. Before then, I wouldn't start cutting. If you're interested in starting cutting now, it's the same plan that we talked about, just you won't gain as much muscle back as quickly as you would have otherwise gained.
100% agree. And then the nice thing about the male physique templates, so you're asking, are there differences in what you're going to program? They're auto-regulated already, right? So you just have to evaluate how you felt about the upper body days once you start that, after you've already done what Mike already described. And then you can evaluate the lower body days separately, right? And just be honest about it. And you better believe you're not going to be able to +1 everything like you probably can the upper body days, and that's totally fine.
Mm-hmm.
So it works itself out.
Yeah. Take your time, Michael. You're going to be back in no time. Ease in. Don't make the huge mistake we've all made, going too fast too soon and getting hurt again.
Yep.
Welcome back, by the way. Mariana Pedromo says, hey, welcome home. Thank you.
Oh, from Australia.
Yeah, I guess.
Thank you.
Question for the husband. I asked about this on the Plus forum. Okay. Kyle had hernia surgery 2 weeks ago this Friday, and when I asked about what he should do about his eating, it was suggested that he goes from cut 1 to base for recovery. Good advice.
Mm-hmm.
Kyle finished Meso 1 of male physique templates and saw results. I saw results too. Happy wife over here. Right on.
Happy wife. Happy life.
That's right. But due to the surgery, he couldn't start Meso 2 yet. He is back at the gym, but can't lift more than 25 pounds. So he has been doing base, non-training day or light days. Of course, he feels like he is eating a lot. He feels like he is getting small. So do you suggest he continues base until he starts Meso 2 and starts lifting again, or resume cut 1? Even though he didn't start Meso 2 fully yet, what are your thoughts? Base until he's training
base
hard.
Until, yeah, normal training.
Easy.
It's, I mean, like, the thing is, like, a lot of people, when you're injured, you have kind of like the sadness of being injured, and then you're not reaching the body composition goals that you want. So it's kind of like a double shit sandwich.
You kind of want to put way too much work into stuff. You kind of want to make up
overcompensate,
for it.
And you just got to ride it out. You just got to ride it out for a little bit, and then you can train hard and do everything right.
Absolutely. Felipe Machado asks, how long can one emphasize a certain muscle group before needing to drop volume to resensitize? I'm currently in a strength phase, but decided to keep my training hypertrophy for a few muscle groups. That wouldn't hurt my performance in the core lifts, which is biceps, of course. I'd keep lats also if its interference in the systemic MRV wasn't so high. By the way, really quick, you can train lats with high volumes and they don't interfere a lot with systemic MRV if you use certain exercises. They don't grow you as much, but you can still grow during those phases. Lat pull downs, machine rows for high reps, not very systemically taxing. Just don't do like bent rows and heavy weighted pull-ups and stuff like that.
You can, like, doing cable rows, you can start at like 8 sets I mean, like, it's stupid.
Basically don't have any effect.
The problem also is that you should probably pick a different exercise at that
Exactly.
point. But yeah, to answer,
just stay away from really axially loading bent rows and stuff like that. I think you should be able to actually crank it out. Could you comment on your thoughts about it, please? Thank you so much, Felipe, for sure. So I think if James and I saw somebody training something for hypertrophy for 3 months straight, we wouldn't bat our eyes. If we saw someone training for 4 to 5 months straight in hypertrophy, we'd be like, maybe. Anything over 6 months of consistent hypertrophy training is like you're itching for a resensitization phase. 6 months is our top end, but between 4 and 5, you could probably be creative and not get to 5. Yeah. I think 4 is defensible. 5 is starting to slide on that other way.
I think you can do a little bit of qualitative analysis on this too. Like, you ever get to that point where you're doing your biceps or you're doing your lat pulls or whatever, and you just don't get a pump, you don't feel good, you don't like feel strong anymore, you just kind of feel flat. That's when it's time to think about cutting it off and moving into resensitization or deloading or something like that. That's when you basically kind of are like, you don't look in the mirror like, oh, God damn anymore, right?
Yeah.
Like,
just feels like you're getting tired.
Just getting tired, not getting much out of it.
Yeah.
Most of us kind of have an intuitive feel for that, and that's a good qualitative, just like.
Yeah. Mariana Pedromo asks, what are your thoughts on grass-fed whey?
They feed grass protein powder?
That's pretty sweet.
Or do they feed the protein powder grass?
Mariana, I'll take this one really quickly. Whey protein doesn't have any fat in it. The advantage of grass-fed animal meats is that their fat content is more healthy, which is in fact true by a tiny margin. Insofar as whey doesn't have any fat in it, it's open and shut case. It's pointless.
I think about like opening the tub of protein and sprinkling in some grass in there, like feed children.
It's actually just grass.
Ugh.
It's like grass chips, like the shit that comes out of a
Jamba Juice was doing the wheatgrass shot for a while. That was horrible.
Did I go on a rant to you that I think Jamba Juice is a gigantic fucking waste of rest?
Yeah, we didn't quite see eye to eye, but it's delicious.
$7 on a fucking thing of juice. It's like 1,000 calories.
It is 1,000 calories, and it's all sugar. It's delicious though.
I gotta try it. She says, one of my friends asked what I thought about it. I said, probably expensive. Not sure if you really need grass-fed whey when it comes to whey. Yes. She probably get the same benefits from Optimum Nutrition whey or any other real quality product. Absolutely. You're not missing anything. Grass-fed whey is not worth the money.
You can get like the whey concentrate. It doesn't matter that much.
Come on now. All right. Felipe Machado, another question, my man. Regarding powerlifting phases, there are exercises which aren't as specific as others, but its responsiveness is much higher. For example, I can PR dips almost twice a week, but hardly once when incline benching or long pause benching. Okay, so they interfere a lot. For this reason, I thought about keeping exercises such as dips in every meso, changing only its grip width for variation purposes. I don't understand the first part of that.
So it sounds like he's saying like he responds really, really well to doing dips, and he can progress at like astronomical rates.
I see. Oh, I got you. Perfect. That makes sense. Currently, I'm in my first strength meso. I thought about keeping competition bench and dips for 2 more mesos and just increasing volume of benching while decreasing the volume of dips as the mesos go to make it more specific, or maybe get one more exercise, a more specific one, and increase its volume, competition bench volume, and decrease dips volume as a meso go. Could you comment your thoughts about it? Yeah, it sounds just fine. He seems like you get a lot out of it. Felipe, I will tell you something about dips that I've experienced. I've done dips with as much, I think I've done a set of 10 with 135 pounds hanging from my waist at a body weight of about 230, super full Israel range of motion. Transfer to my bench at all. Dips and overhead presses, more dips than overhead presses have sometimes dubious transfer to benching.
Yeah. So again, we want to think about phasic training, right? So your question was about strength meso. So what we can think about is during your hypertrophy phases, it might be a great time to incorporate dips as an accessory movement into your training. And then as you transition into strength phases, you might want to maybe think about phasing those out a little bit and maybe do more like incline benching or more close grip type variations if you're thinking about competing in like a powerlifting event, right?
Yeah. And when you're saying that you don't PR on a ton on incline benching and log pause benching, well, those have much more transfer training to benching, and it kind of tells me that your dips aren't predictive of those. They're not predictive of the bench. So
yeah, nothing wrong with the exercise, but for powerlifting, you're going to want to phase them out at some point as you transition.
Absolutely. Eli Holland says, greetings, gents. Greetings, Eli.
Greetings.
What are the differences between women and men in general? I'm just kidding. With regards to dieting.
I was like, wait, are we going there?
Well, you see, to quote was it Kindergarten Cop? With regards to dieting, I thought I remembered hearing that men are able to diet for longer periods or greater deficits as compared to women. Yes, that is likely true. Would the lengths of cutting phases and maintenance phases be the same and based on the individual, or are there general recommendations that can be made for women versus men?
You know, in my experience, and I don't know if this is absolutely true, but my personal experience, men can get away, and I use the term get away because it doesn't imply that it's better. It just means that they can do it. They can get away with shorter maintenance phases, whereas females tend to exclusively require at least 2 months, probably upwards of 3 months for a lot of cases. Guys, sometimes 1 to 2 months, and they're good to go in the maintenance phase. Again, that's not to say that that's the best way to go about it, but you know, they can kind of get by and keep losing weight. Mike?
Yeah, agreed. Men can mass faster, they can cut faster, they can mass longer, they can cut longer. They can take shorter maintenance. You can basically be more aggressive with men in pretty much every single capacity.
Is that because of the testosterone?
Definitely testosterone has your aggression is because of the testosterone. Definitely the testosterone hormonal and genetic differences play a role. One of the differences that there's not a lot of hard data for this, but there's a lot of very good likelihood of it is that females kind of have a physiology that is more designed to be resistant to losing fat, because women need their fat to stay fertile. And if women were really good at getting super lean in a natural environment, they get so lean that they'd be amenorrheic too often and not reproducing.
Yeah.
So I think evolution has designed women to be more resistant to fat loss than men, which means it needs to be coaxed more. What does that mean? Shorter cuts, less aggressive cuts, longer maintenance phases, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think those are the big differences there.
Totally agree.
Penny Danner asks, for strength athletes wanting to maintain around a weight class, say 137, 138, is it faster or better to do the cut, maintain, mass, maintain cycle over and over? There is no such cycle, by the way. After cutting, if you want to put on more muscle mass, you start massing right away. You don't maintain. Then to just maintain, yes. What are the benefits of running cycles of 125 pounds to 140, 125 to 140, than to just maintain this 137 forever and make it stronger? If a person doesn't carry a lot of lean mass as it is right now, what would be the best way to structure this for a strength athlete? So I'll tell you this. So if a person does carry a lot of lean mass and they're already fairly lean, all of this excessive massing and cutting is just disrupting homeostasis for very minimal gains. You should probably just stay about the same weight and just get strong, doing mostly strength training, occasionally coming back and doing a couple weeks here and there of hypertrophy. If you are at a very big deficit of lean mass, that architecture of going up and down and up and down and up and down, remember, going up is the best way to gain muscle. Going down is the best way to lose fat while maintaining your muscle. If you do both, it is better than maintaining that weight through a certain time.
Yes.
There is no such thing as hardening up, right? You don't take the fat, don't say it. We're alive, don't say it. I know what you're going to say. You know you too goddamn well. So if you stay the same weight, yeah, you will add muscle and lose fat over time, but it's not going to be much. There's really no disruption to that homeostatic system, right? It is the process of the really big affront and really big backing off and a really big affront, really big backing off, that over a long time, you add some muscle during every mass, you burn some fat that stays off during every cut. Eventually, you're going to be bigger and leaner and the same weight. So yes, you should be cyclic if that person is at a big deficit of lean body mass. If they're already pretty lean for the weight class, remember, cutting and massing, they interfere with your training to some extent.
Yeah.
If you're massing, you have to do more hypertrophy work than you could be doing strength work. If you're cutting, that same thing is true.
Problem.
And it also screws up how fast you progress.
It interferes with your competition cycle.
Totally. So it's not worth it if you're already well on your way. But if you're not, yeah, you should cycle for sure. James, what do you think about that?
Absolutely, right? So I think that the differentiating factor is kind of your body composition relative to your weight class, right? So if you are holding out as a female, you know, consistently around 12, 15% of your body fat, and you're right around your competition body weight, you can just hang out and just do maintenance for a pretty long time and do some very, very minor fluctuations for weigh-in. That's fine. You're probably pretty lean and jacked for that weight class. If you're kind of, you know, wet spaghetti hot dog for the weight class, then yeah, it's probably better to do the cyclic and really try and fill out as much muscle mass as you can. So I think body composition is probably the differentiating factor there.
Yep. You might as well read this one.
All right, Tony, back in business. So at some point, I had previously said that a greater delay in muscle soreness onset after training can indicate a insufficient recovery. Is it reasonable to assume that this will allow you to yield fewer hypertrophic or strength adaptations, or can the SRA curve stretch far enough to still get the full adaptation? Also, is there any short-term way to identify that training may be producing adaptation rather than just recovery? Let's get to that one in a second. Yeah, so here's the deal, right? So if you are experiencing, now DOMS isn't like the end-all be-all. It's a great, at the best we can say indirect, but we can hopefully in the future say direct indicator of things like muscle growth. I think it's pretty strong at this point, but I don't know if we can completely say direct.
Some people seriously disagree with that, and us, we personally happen to think they're wrong, very respectively. But I think that here's just a really quick summary of DOMS and hypertrophy. If you are getting no DOMS at all, you may be getting hypertrophy, but it's by no means clear. If you're getting a little bit of DOMS and healing within a couple of days, that's probably where you're getting most of your best hypertrophy. If you're getting really radical DOMS that takes like a week to go away, you may be doing some kind of delayed adaptation, activation of satellite cell stuff that's going to make you jacked later. But within that short time frame, you're probably just recovering. It's like a car accident at that point. So there's a middle ground there. So when he says that, you know, if you stretch out your hypertrophy training, if you basically don't get sore until 48 hours after hypertrophy, is it reasonable to assume that this will lead fewer hypertrophic and strength adaptations? I think if you encounter this chronically, yeah.
So the problem that you run into is, and what I think is really interesting, is transcription and translation. So basically the cell and genetic reproduction process generally starts the wheels turning around 2 or 3 hours post-exercise, whereas protein synthesis, so like your actual expression of those new fitness adaptations that you made, usually peak around 24 to 48 hours. So the problem that you run into is if you are doing something, especially in the immediate like post-training time, or kind of stretched out, like not getting enough sleep or not getting enough nutrition, where you're really not getting any soreness or feeling any of the after effects of training, you probably missed out on the earlier window when the wheel started turning, and you're maybe not getting as much out of your training as you potentially could have. It's by no means clear, but I think that's a very strong theoretical case. And this is something that we've all experienced at some point. Maybe you didn't do your nutrition as well, or maybe you trained really hard and then your uncle was like, hey, we got to go wheelbarrow some shit around right after training, and you went and did that. And you didn't really get sore, right? You got stiff, and then a couple of days later you got sore. Well, that's because now we're seeing,
didn't get sore,
or maybe not. And maybe you had peak soreness maybe 48 hours later, but you probably missed out on, I don't want to say a lot, but a chunk of whatever you would have got. And I think that's a reasonable theoretical position.
Yeah. So next one's actually super interesting. Looking through my training logs at the times I've made the most muscular growth, I've always had the deepest desire for sleep and taking midday naps like a baby, although I didn't actually sleep more. This is super speculative, but is there any possibility this is a correlation as a useful indicator? Yes. I wouldn't just go looking for this exact correlate, but I think we can reasonably explain what's going on here. Here's the deal. Let's just look at your desire and ability, your need and ability to require tons of rest and recovery. If you're under training, you don't feel tired, you don't feel like you need a lot of sleep because you're not doing shit. If you're overtraining or doing too much, you are going to be tired, but you're not going to be able to sleep, or you're just going to feel nervous and afraid because you're going to be in sympathetic overdrive. Where you probably get your best gains is when training fucks you up so that you're super tired and hungry as hell. You eat a bunch of food, you get plenty of sleep, and then you make your best gains.
Absolutely.
That almost the ideal scenario, and this is what I like to, when I rarely on occasion coach individuals, and I still help some of my friends, I'll help Jared Feather and stuff. The best kind of gains I tend to see, I very much agree with you, come when people are like, dude, my workouts are fucking me up. I'm super hungry. I'm sleeping a shitload. I get deep, crazy sleep. You can't ask for more. That's recovery on overdrive and training on overdrive. If someone's like, yeah, my workout's like, I have all this tons of energy and I want to keep going out and like doing stuff and I can't fall asleep at night because I'm not tired enough. We're like, we must not be training you hard enough. But if we're training you so hard that you can't fall asleep because you're like sympathetic overdrive, that's too much on the other end.
Yeah. One of the things I get with my clients a lot, and this is by no means trying to call anybody out, but one of the problems that I see a lot is they'll say like, how's your training going well? And they're like, yeah, it's really hard, but I think I'm going to go start doing CrossFit, like 2 or 3 more times per week, and then do a spin class and then do some other stuff. Like, if you got energy to do that, you are really underdoing your base training stuff, right? So of course they're going to say like, oh, I'm going to do more other stuff, but you probably could have been training more. And like what Mike was saying, if the training is not so overloading that you have to take steps to manage fatigue, like altering your lifestyle, getting more sleep, taking more relaxation time, it's probably not enough.
Yeah.
That's the simple truth.
Yeah. Eli Holland says, for a post-workout shake, I use fruits plus sugar plus whey instead of Gatorade or other super high GI powders plus whey. Is that going to be the difference between winning first or second, or is it negligible? Remember, the difference between winning first or second is close to negligible.
Yeah.
Assuming calories, macros, and meal timing are dialed in. I mean, so Eli, to be completely honest with you, you have to be very exclusively competitive competition to be the difference between first and second. And that probably occurs based on other factors. I'll put you this way. If you want the optimal, stop doing that. If you want something really close, if everything else is dialed in, something really awesome, and you really like fruit and sugar, then do it up.
Yeah.
You're missing out on something. It's just probably not a ton.
Yeah. And I would say, especially if you're training multiple times per day, that might be more of an issue. But if you're just training once per day, I don't know.
You're probably fine.
You're probably fine.
Ioseba Ariola.
I remember that name. I wonder why.
Yeah, Mike, James, lame ass regular names. Hi, gentlemen. How can I assess how long should a mesocycle be? Do you write programs in advance instead of fixed number of accumulation weeks? Yes. Mm-hmm. Or do you adjust the length of the mesocycle as you go? Also, yes. Well, if there are exceptions to the rule.
If you can make
but it has to be a good reason. Sometimes I feel pretty beat up, but I am able to maintain performance. And I feel like I'm leaving gains on the table by finishing a mesocycle there and deloading. If you feel pretty beat up, fucking deload. Because remember, the percent of injuries that occur in that scenario you just described are really high.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel pretty beat up, but I can still hit it. So what you're really telling us, and this is not to be mean to you, this is just some real talk you expect here at the forum, right? You're telling us you feel beat up, so you know structures are damaged, and you're still able to perform at a high level. That means you're telling us, hey guys, while my shit is most fucked up and susceptible to injury, I'm giving it the most it's ever gotten. Don't do that. If you feel beat up, it's time to deload.
The other thing too, I'm wondering is like, if you feel like you're leaving gains at the table, like being able to train up towards your MRV, right, will get you feeling really beat up. Still maintaining performance. That's one of the things that we've said for MRV, right? You're still able to perform. So, I mean, that's ideal, in my opinion. Where are you? What are you leaving on the table? It sounds like you're doing just fine.
Regression. Remember, you don't deload. The rule isn't to deload after you've regressed. The rule is to get so good at knowing that, okay, I'm going to regress next week. Don't do that.
Exactly.
Deload, okay?
So I don't think you're leaving anything on the table.
It says, I'm considering adding AMRAP sets, as many reps as possible, to my program as a way of assessing performance and fatigue. That is one of those situations in which the measurement instrument actually fucks up your program. Don't do that.
It's going to be so variable.
Don't incorporate them.
If you train in the morning and then you train in the afternoon, your AMRAP sets are going to be different. It's too variable.
I'll tell you this, Ioseba, but we'll give you some really good advice. So know your body well enough so that you can plan a mesocycle that is, you'll know within 1 to 2 weeks of your planned end of accumulation, beginning of deload date, that you should probably be pretty cooked by then. If you get to a week before that and you're really fucked up, deload early. If you get through that last week and you don't feel beat up very much and you feel really good and your performance is still climbing, then you can take another week if it doesn't interfere with your annual plan or doing some competitions or something like that. Does that make sense? So give yourself a 1 week plus minus at the end of it to take extra if you need, or a little bit less if you can't recover, right? Get to know your body and run that. That should adjust for almost every kind of situation of way too much recovery or not enough recovery you should get into. You don't need to assess performance by AMRAPs, because remember, AMRAPs are highly fatiguing.
Yeah.
You will assess performance, and that performance will be lower than you wanted it to be every time because you're assessing.
And then, like, what happens when you acutely overreach? You know, then your AMRAP goes in the toilet, and it's like, well. The other thing too, real quick, just to add to that, on a very more general, Mike gave a very explicit explanation, just on a very general level too, for the programs that we write ahead of time. Usually for beginner, novice people, we do 3-in-1s, kind of like 3 weeks up, 1 week down. As they move into intermediate, which is kind of like 3-5 years of actual hard structured training, we generally will move up to like 4-in-1, possibly even 5-in-1 in some cases. But then after they get to closer to 10 years of training, very often we actually regress back down to 3-in-1 because it gets so crazy difficult for them to train. So be honest with yourself. If you're a beginner to intermediate of doing real scientific training, you can probably do 3 up, 1 down. And if you're more intermediate, you can probably do 4 up and 1 down.
Mm-hmm. Dan Pacella says, are we sure that resensitization to a specific training stimulus, for example, hypertrophy, really occurs after a period of maintenance? Not 100%. On a podcast, another in the field shed doubt on whether resensitization is a real thing, arguing that what's being mistaken for resensitization to a stimulus is just fatigue being alleviated, followed by being able to do more than previously because of higher fitness and fatigue. I think that's
part of it. That's part of it.
It might not be the only part. So normally a deload, or if you want a very extended 2-week deload, will alleviate all the fatigue you're carrying, but you still are not getting the same kinds of results. You're still relatively resistant to hypertrophy. I think some of those things like mTOR, AMP kinase activity, even when fatigue falls, if they've been elevated for a while or reduced for a while, they might take several weeks to come back. And resensitization to a specific training stimulus, for exercises, for example, for getting used to specific exercises, those muscle fibers, et cetera, the particular kinds of damage they take on, the particular kinds of adaptation to a certain rep range, nervous system wise, et cetera, might take more than just a deload, more than just fatigue reduction. Are we putting 100% of our money in that? No, it could just be fatigue reduction. We don't think it's likely, which is why we think resensitization is an independent variable.
And so, not to be argumentative here, but we actually agree with the latter point about alleviating fatigue and just being able to do more. But here's an example, right? So let's say you did a resensitization phase, take out high bar squats for a while, maybe just do low bar squats or something else, right? For sets of 5, come back, do high bar squats or maybe even front squats for sets of 10. You actually can't do as much as you could have in that previous phase, right? You get more overloaded from that. And that's part of the resensitization process as well. So normally if you could top out at, maybe 8 sets of front squat, after you come off a low volume phase, you might have to start with a minimum effective volume of maybe like 4 sets just because it's so brutal.
And those 4 sets are giving you as much growth as 6 sets used to.
Exactly.
Which is good. You get more bang for the buck. So yeah, I think there's something else to it other than fatigue. If that turns out to not be the case, I would be surprised, but not incredibly. Felipe, thank you very much, Felipe, for sure. Let's see. Felipe says if there's time, we got like 2 minutes. Let's get to a couple of other individuals. Okay, so Daniel Jolly, our last question here. Our last independent question asker.
I love that one. Mariana. Man.
Daniel Jolly says, Dr. Mike, do you get significant hamstring glute soreness from leg training? Dr. James, go fuck yourself.
What's up with this? Wow, who am I? Chopped liver?
Do you get significant hamstring and glute soreness from leg pressing? No. The way I leg press, you've probably seen videos, Daniel, of me leg pressing. I press, put my feet really low on the platform, pretty close together. It's all quads. Quads get fucked up every single time, guaranteed. Everything else, not a fucking thing. Now you might, and if you want that, cool. Then your technique works. If you don't, legs lower on the platform. Your glutes may still get sore, especially if you have pretty tight glutes. But hamstrings should probably not be getting sore from leg press. What do you think, James?
Every now and again, like when I'm doing higher rep leg presses and I'm really getting tired, I'll feel my glutes firing a bit more, where I usually don't feel them firing much at all, and I'll be like, my glutes. But almost never does that result in any hamstring or glute-related soreness. Every now and again, I'll feel them kicking in more and contributing more synergistically, but usually not enough significant hip extension to really.
Glutes maybe, hamstrings, nah. Another one copied from the forum. I posted it there and you ignored it, but what the fuck ever, dude. And I should shorten the question anyway because it was one of my usual Bible efforts. Well, commentary on your own question sure as hell increases question length, doesn't it, Daniel Jolly? How do you approach it when you have 2 consecutive movements that hit the same muscle group? Say your program has you starting with 3 sets of something quads and 3 sets of something else quads. I need to dump high bar squats because I've been doing them for about 94 consecutive mesocycles. I thought of skewing it, so I start the meso with something like 1 set of low bar squats in the heavier range and 5 sets of probably hack squats. Why 1 set of low bar squats?
You know, I would just say don't do low bar squats generally for quad development. I mean, it's great for a strength phase, but
it'll fuck your shit up with either fuck your elbows up, your wrists up, or your shoulders.
Yeah.
One of those. Try some front squatting, maybe.
Close stance.
Try some close stance high bar squatting, maybe even on a Smith machine.
There's a lot of variations you can play with. So sometimes people get caught up in like front squat, high bar squat, low bar squat.
Wide stance sumo squat.
But there's wide stance sumo squat.
Or medium stance sumo.
Smith machine squats with parallel feet, right? With feet open. There's close stance. There's hack squat, which you already mentioned. There's a shitload of squat variants that you can use. And you can even get crazy. You can do like Katsu squats if you want. You can do slow eccentric squats if you're just looking for a little bit of variation. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do. You can even mix it up and do some unilateral stuff. Usually we advocate for doing mostly bilateral, but if you've been kind of stale and doing the same shit, you can do some single leg squats, which are really fucking hard, by the way. Not maybe as a primary movement, maybe after you did something else like a hack squat or a leg press. Yeah. Plenty of opportunity there.
Hack squats are great, but I would say take that low bar squat and replace it with mid stance sumo or close stance feet forward or close stance feet forward on the Smith. You can also do some pause squats. It's still the same high bar squat, same feet and everything, but it's a different stimulus. Slow eccentric squats as well might do the trick. So give that some
thought. For the subsequent exercises, you may have to adjust the relative load because you've accumulated some fatigue from the first exercise. But other than that, it's the same.
Yeah. Also, Daniel, if you haven't done hack squats in a really long time, don't do 5 sets of them right at once because you're just not going to walk. Start with the low set number for the stuff you haven't done yet, because remember, its MRV individually for that exercise is going to be really low because you're not used to it. So I would say work into it. Cool.
Yeah.
All right, folks, it's that time for us to go back to our meaningless, pointless lives, awaiting the time when death releases us from all of our worldly responsibilities. How metal was that?
Not soon enough. I'm going to go out to the forest and take care of business.
See you there. Thanks so much, folks, for joining in. Let us pull up the thingamabobber that actually gets us out so there's no awkward delay.
Bye.
See you guys next week.